Hello, welcome to another week at the bungalow. Back in the kitchen this week, carrying on where we left off. Worktops to do, so previously we'd got all the cabinets in, they're all fixed into place, we've got things like the oven and fridge in place. So now we're getting the kitchen worktops, major job, so we've got the join at the back to do on the L-shaped worktop, and then we're also doing across the island is going to be a 900 wide waterfall worktop. So this is where we get the 45 degrees at either end and it drops down onto the floor. So to make life easier and to warm us up, we're starting with what we've considered to be the slightly easier of the two, which is the rear L-shaped worktop. So this requires just a joint in between the two to hold it together. It's the standard worktop joint. So we're cutting it with the router, using the jig there you can see leaned up. So this is a lot of backwards and forwards, measuring and then cutting. As far as with the router, takes several passes to get through the 40mm of timber. So every time we're running through, we're pushing on the edge nearest to us, and then when we do the final pass, we'll push on the edge closest to, which will give us a nice clean cut when it comes to. And of course, as well as the cut, to make sure it marries up nicely, we also have to cut the lugs in for the bolts that hold the two pieces together. So we're biscuit jointing and also putting some bolts in. So the biscuit joints hold the two surfaces nice and level and stop one rising up against the other, just in case there's any bow in the worktop. And then these bolts cramp the joint close together. So you can see the two halves of the surface. This is the rear, and then it doesn't really matter too much where the biscuit joints goes in, so we're just evening them up as much as possible, getting a line so we're putting the two cuts in the same place. And then once again with the router, with the biscuit cutter on it, just cutting through, giving ourselves a notch to put the biscuits in. Due to the fact we've got mechanical fixings in the way of the bolts, we won't be putting any glue on this joint, so it'll be left dry, just using the mechanical fixings and the biscuits. So keeping it away from the surface at the moment, dry fitting it together, just making sure that it clamps up nicely and that the joint's smooth, and we're not going to have any problems when it comes to putting it into actual place. As far as the fitment of the worktops is concerned, we'll obviously screw up through the cabinets into the bottom of the surface. We are putting an upstand around the two walls, or as were the plastered walls, and not on the cabinets. So it was important that those edges were absolutely tight, so we're always concentrating on those. And we do have a bit of forgiveness when it comes to the wall edge, in as much as we've got about a 5mm gap, which will be covered up by the 20mm upstand, and you'll see that on another video. But at the moment we're just getting these surfaces in and in place so we can finish off the rest of the cabinets. So as you can see, end to end nice tight fit, and it's pushing those biscuits together before it's clamped up. So you might wonder why after putting the surface in place we've removed it again and it's back on the bench. We end up rounding off the edges, so top and bottom we give it a slight round over. When the oak comes initially it's very square edged and it's not particularly forgiving, especially with the J-pull handles that we've got in the kitchen. You're rubbing your knuckles right up against the underside of the surface. So we've decided to put a round over on both edges just to ease that and just stop you knocking yourself. So another day forward. Worktops were done yesterday. Claire also got a coat of Osmo onto those, so the back ones are done. You see that joint closed up nicely, and then end to end it's nice and tight. So this is the big one, first cut for the waterfall surface. We're going all the way across the 900s. We're using the track saw. Set to as near as we can get it, 45 degrees. To be fair, the scale on the track saw is pretty close, so it works out pretty well. We do give ourselves a couple of practice cuts just to make sure we're sort of dialing it in just right. As much as we brought the surface to as near as possible fit, there was a little bit of spare, and so we have a bit of play. Here we're just eyeing up so that we cut through and we don't get through an edge of one of the blocks in the block board. So it's a matter of wriggling the measurement slightly forward and backwards to get it so we're not hitting anything like that. The only problem can be is if you do hit it, you can end up with a bit of breakout, or a piece of the block can fall out and you end up having to try and get that back in and glue it back in, so it's just easier to miss it. So you can probably imagine with all these sort of things, there's a lot of toing and froing, there's a lot of offering up, there's a lot of measuring, remeasuring, checking and making sure it's absolutely spot on. You can see on the left hand side a test piece there where we tried out the biscuit jointing to make sure that was going to work, so it was a trial on that one. All of this sort of stuff we'd watched, well, as one does, other people on YouTube to see how they do it and then working from there. Each cut's pretty slow. We're at full depth of the track saw on the 45 degrees, so the resistance on the blade is massive. This is the far end of the worktop. This is pretty much how we get the biscuits cut in. So you use your two cuts that you've made, you stack the two of them together and clamp them into place. You square them up so they're absolutely even, and so the 2 points of the 45 degrees match up. And then we're marking so that we can put our biscuits into place. You can see there on the 45 degree cuts the heat that's generated from the blade with the resistance of the oak. It's a tough old wood. And then where the 2 points are put together, we're using the flat surface to rest the router base on so that the blade cuts in and we get it at 90 degrees to the actual surface. So when the two are put together, the biscuits slide one into each of the other slots. So while the work surface is mobile and we can still lift it out of place, marking up for the sink to be cut in. So this is just a stainless steel sink hung into the worktop. So using the masking tape to mark out all the pencil lines, making sure we get it in the centre, and it's obviously got to be in the centre of the cabinet so when we cut through, the sink hangs nicely in there and doesn't clash with anything either side. And then of course it doesn't matter how many times you measure these things, you still want to put the item that's got to drop through the hole into place so you can see that it's actually going to fit. And it's going to be as near as it can be. So we don't make any silly mistakes and it's not vastly out or wildly different. And this, like I say, just makes it easier. We can move it over onto the workbench and we can make the cuts over there rather than being on top of the surfaces and everything screwed down into place. Track saw's been used to cut the main bulk of the material out, and then just using the jigsaw to trim into the final bits of the corner where the circular saw can't. So exactly the same as the other worktop. This one's getting rounded over, so we're running round it with a small router and rounded off top and bottom of all the sections. Sinkhole's obviously been cut, and then it's time to glue up and put the first leg into place. This drops down onto the floor and then gets screwed to the carcassing afterwards. So we've got a special jig here, holds the clamps at 45 degrees, so the initial piece of timber is clamped to the two sections of the wood, and then we use a multitude of clamps to pull that at 45 degrees to each other, pulling the joint together. So with the first end setting up and drying, give the sinker trial run in the hole, test fit it. We test fitted it on the workbench to make sure they actually fit it, but now it's seeing where if it clashes with everything inside the units, because the work surface is exactly where it's going to live. So time for a bit of a tidy up, stick some of the tools away. All the pieces are ready for being glued up the next day with regards to the rest of the clamping. So this is the final end, all clamped together. You can see the sort of 45-degree pieces that are on there. So the clamp sort of pull across the joint and get it as tight as we possibly can. "24 hours has passed, and the other end is all dried up, so this end can be done. We can reuse the clamps and the jig to hold it all into place. So gluing all the surfaces. This is exactly the same as we did previously. There's no mechanical fixings in the actual joint. Literally just using the glue and the biscuits to hold it all in place. The only mechanical fixings will be screws that will come through the cabinets into the worktop to hold it. And there she is, all in place. Just a little tap to square it up. And then the clamps can go on to squeeze it tight and try and get the little bit of glue to squeeze out, so we know that we've got it just right. Measuring it to get it square, so we've got the 45 degrees across the joint. So we're using the F clamps to hold the actual jig onto the work surface, only because they clamp a lot tighter, and then we're using the usual quick grips across to evenly spread the load. And that's all done, ready for its 24 hours. So just before we leave you for this week, one final thing needed to be done on the worktop, or just on that waterfall edge, is just to roll the edge with a bit of sandpaper, and the shaft of the screwdriver just closes up that gap. Just ease it slightly. It's absolutely, I mean, we managed to cut ourselves on the 45 degree of the oak because it's just so sharp. So it just takes that away and closes up the gap. So until next week, when we complete the kitchen worktops, I thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.